Hi, welcome back to Deep Images, and we are continuing our Halloween 2024 offerings with our series on zombies. We are wrapping up zombies with some classics here, and I'm going to talk about one today. I'm here with my co-host Rhiannon Clark, by the way. I'm Henry Covert, if anyone doesn't know, and we are going to be talking about some exciting films here. So. The first one, the one I want to talk about is Messiah of Evil. So this was a 1973 film, but it wasn't released until December of 1974. It was a troubled, low-budget production, but it spawned a lot of great talent that came out of this movie. A lot of great talent was associated with this movie, and it's been vastly underrated over the years. And it has a following now that's pretty sizable, but it's only taken like two generations, you know. But so Messiah of Evil, um, it's basically a couple conceived this, Gloria Katz and Willard Hike, and spelled
Mhm.
Huyck. Um, and they basically co-produced it. They co-wrote it. Willard Hike is credited as the director, but they actually co-directed it. And because not many, there weren't many co-director
Mm.
credits back then. Usually somebody got it, you know. Um, anyway, they end up getting married at some point. I don't know if they were married at the time they made this. Gloria Katz got her brother Stephen Katz to shoot this movie to be the cinematographer. And they had a friend named Jack Fisk, who was an up and coming production designer, who was married to an up and coming actress named Sissy Spacek. And of course, this plays into the development of David Lynch as well, because Sissy Spacek, helped finish the funding for Eraserhead because she was friends with Jack Fisk, who was friends with David Lynch. And Jack Fisk did the production design subsequently on almost all of David Lynch's films. So this is the first movie you see that has that kind of way out design that became popularized by his works with Lynch. Um, so basically, this is like a Lovecraftian story, H.P. Lovecraftian story. It's very it's
Like a
kind of
reanimator.
like Reanimator, and it's very much delving. It's kind of influenced by stories like The Shadow over Innsmouth, where like a whole town is kind of gradually becoming these kind of aquatic creatures because they basically the town itself is the product of intermating between these aquatic creatures, the deep ones, and humans over the centuries. So this shoreside town, they're all kind of regressing and reverting, to this state. And he did other films like this where I mean, other films, other stories where you have like these little towns. Obviously Arkham is his most famous one, but like the case of Charles
Mhm.
Dexter Ward, a similar thing happens, and that was made into the movie Haunted Palace with Vincent Price. And in that one, you actually see the people kind of beginning to mutate or degenerate, in that one. And actually, that shares a cast member with the movie I'm about to talk about, Elisha Cook. But so they were in that kind of vein. Not many people are doing Lovecraftian stuff. So
Yeah.
Messiah of Evil not being adaptation, but it's definitely kind of it's in that it has those vibes, those Lovecraft vibes, and it is a small town called Point Dune, a fictional town. It's described as a neon stucco town where all the houses are kind of alike. It's very quiet. It's bucolic. Um, and into this comes this character named Arletty, played by Mariana Hill. She had really notable turns back during that day. She was in Medium Cool with Robert Forster. Great role in that. And then, of course, she became quite a bit more popular. She was in High Plains Drifter as the female lead opposite Clint Eastwood, though I can't really say that she wasn't a love interest because he was only interested in vengeance, not love. But uh she was in quite a few other things, television. She was in a Star Trek episode, Dagger of the Mind, in a very notable role. But she's a character actress, if you want to call her that. But she was kind of glamorous. But now among younger people, other than High Plains Drifter, she's really kind of known now for Messiah of Evil, because it's the only one movies where she's the main character, the protagonist, and the narrator. And that wasn't really common in horror movies back then. I mean, you did have the final girl, starting.
I did glance upon it to say that it was a very beautiful, really 70s looking film. The
It,
color of the film,
oh,
stunning.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, they did so much with so little. I mean, the lighting, the natural lighting outside and all the indoor stuff. And um, so our Letty comes to this town, Point Dune, to find her father, who's a artist named Joseph Lang, and he paints these huge mural-like things of these kind of bizarre, austere kind of people who are mostly men in black suits. And his studio is that's what it is. I don't know how much you saw of that, but that's what his whole studio is, and that was all Jack Fisk's design. And they even deliberately framed the actors within the giant characters. I mean, he's like they became like characters, these giant figures that he had painted. I forgot who really painted them. I'm not sure if Jack Fisk himself painted it or not, but he assembled the studio, the fictional studio, and so, she comes into town and no one, it's kind of like, have you seen my father? And everybody's like, your typical, I don't want to say frightened, but they're not really saying much. They all seem a little superstitious and they don't really want to talk about Joseph Lang. They see him as just kind of a weirdo artist that passed through town and now he's gone. And because they're very clannish, they're very cliquish, it's
It's a
like,
very wicker manny.
yes, they don't like outsiders, in their
Yeah.
town. And so our Letty just kind of she gets to the studio, she's gonna stay there. I mean, I guess technically it's hers if he's dead, but she doesn't know if he's dead or alive. But she finds these diaries of his, and it alternates between the voiceover narration of her, which is written in a very literary fashion. It's not like a 70s. I mean, her dialogue in the regular part of the movie is, but in the narration, it's not like a regular 70s low budget horror movie. It's written more like I don't want to say like Lovecraft, but it's written more like an old kind of manuscript. Like, I came into the neon stucco town.
Gothic. Gothic. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
it's really poetic, actually.
yeah.
I noticed it was quite poetic, very like a almost like a love story to horror, kind of the way it was.
Oh, well said. And yeah, and then they alternate that with her father, his narration too. Like when she's reading the diaries, you hear his voice. And he's played by Royal Dano, who at that time was a character actor. Uh, I knew Royal Dano much later in his life toward the end. And, anybody who was in my favorite show ever, I always used the name of the show to introduce them. I got that from Kevin Smith and the way he introduces actors, like so and so, like he would say, like Mallrats, Jason Lee, about his own
Oh,
movies. So I have to say,
very humble.
Twin Peaks
Wow.
is Royal Dano. So Twin Peaks is Royal Dano is in this. So whenever Twin Peaks alum is in something, I always call them that. Um, but yeah, this is many years before he played in Twin Peaks. But um, so we don't really see the father. We don't know if he's alive or dead. But in his journals, he describes how he's losing the sense of touch and sensation. He's making weird sounds at night. He's having these horrid thoughts, and he has this super dramatic. He's like, and all my thoughts are death, always death,
Oh.
you know. and, and she's reading it and looking really disturbed. Um, so in her little quest, she comes upon she gets a lead. I forgot why she goes to this hotel. I think there's a guy at a bookstore who kind of blows her off and kind of makes fun of. He's like, "We are not an artist colony." He's like this pretentious dude, and I guess there was a market for some of that kind of thing, patronizingly. And but they guide her to this hotel where this character Tom, Thom, Tom. We never know his last name. Tom, played by Michael Greer, really one of my favorite characters in all of genre film. And he's kind of a hippie, kind of a dandy, kind of a worldly guy, kind of maybe a storyteller, maybe is fabricating things about himself. He's obsessed with urban legends and all legends of all cultures. And he claims to have been the son of an English man, a white man, and a Portuguese mother who of royalty. So he
Is he
inherited
a
it.
fantasist?
What'd you
Or
say?
did they say a fantasist, or is this true in the film?
It's never confirmed. I've noticed that in write-ups of the movie, like especially like Wikipedia, they at face value they call him a Portuguese American aristocrat, but that's never. There's a little doubt
Shocker.
cast because one of his friends says, "Oh, I thought it was a Spanish villa." Like maybe he's told the story before about himself.
Yeah.
So it may be all fake. I mean, it's
Oh, good.
but he is very erudite, very eloquent, very stylish and decadent. He has two female companions. He has the more classically modeled pretty Laura, played by Nitra Ford, who's just one of my favorite actresses from that period. And then they've got the nymphette. That's what Kim Newman calls her, the nymphette character, Tony, Toni, played by Joy Bang, which wasn't her real name, and she wasn't a porn actress, though she kind of almost became one. But Joy Bang playing a nymphette, go 1973. I mean, how perfect can you be there, really?
It's
And
her alter ego, so probably.
and they're both his lovers, and his companions, as or he put it, my traveling companions, and
Ooh.
he has a very mannered way of speaking. Michael Greer died relatively young, and he was a gay actor. He was closeted, though most people knew he was gay. This is the only role where he actually played a squarely heterosexual man. Um, he became famous from a play called Fortune and Men's Eyes, which was made into a film with him, which was well received by its target audience, but like totally forgotten. I eventually found a copy and saw it not too long ago, and he did some other television and minor movie roles, but this is now the movie he's kind of known for. Um, but it's against type for him. So that's what a
Mhm.
great actor he was, because I would have never thought he was gay. I mean, but he's a dandy. He's of that era. He's soft. He's slim. He's feminine. He's long haired. He's really stylish. Always has these wonderful suits. And
Mhm.
so this was the era where people were questioning gender roles. A man didn't have to dress a certain way or have their hair a certain way. They could still be a man. And obviously rock stars, many of them looked kind
Yeah,
kind of like women, but they were getting more women than most men. And that
probably. Yeah, like David Bowie, for example. Yeah.
yeah, or later Prince. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
wore a woman's lingerie on stage. And got
Indeed.
got women, but
Hmm.
so Tom is an intriguing character, and you can tell there's a little attraction of him. He's attracted to Arletty when he sees her, and predictably or not predictably, yes, she is kind of attracted to him, but she's not. She feels like she's kind of like, these people are weirdos. I just need help finding my father. I don't want to trifle with them. Um, and she just wants to talk for them for a minute, and they're sprawled out, and they have this giant bed. I don't know how they managed to get this in this hotel in this kind of town. Giant round bed where the three of them congregate, and he's like, come in and close the door. She's like, well, I just want to ask you about. He's like, come in and close the door, please. And she closes the door, and then he's like, all cultures have their legends, even Point Dune. And he's basically considered a collector of tales and legends. And Laura makes fun of him, and she's like, Tom likes to collect things. And one when she comes there, Tom's actually interviewing the town drunk, an archetypal character in horror movies, uh, played by Elisha Cook Jr., great character actor who was in Haunted Palace. And he's telling them about the legend of the blood moon. So once every 100 years, the blood moon will come. The moon will turn blood red, and madness will reign in Point Dune. And he's coming back, and you don't really know who's coming back at that point yet. You find out later the whole backstory, and the time of the blood moon is nigh. So of course Arletty thinks he's a nut, and Tom doesn't, though, obviously. And I liked that about Tom too, that he was like really respectful to the town drunk. He didn't like, he just thought he was a
Shut
cool.
him down. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when she's leaving after being kind of annoyed by them and not getting enough information, because they actually tried to buy one of her father's paintings. That was one reason they were there. And then it sold mysteriously out from under Tom. They don't get into that later, but When she's leaving, the drunken guy, Charlie, accosts her and he starts talking about her father and he knows about her father. She's like, you know my father? And he's like, you got to get rid of him. You gotta you gotta kill him. She's like, what? You are crazy. And he's like, no, no, you can't bury his body. You've got to you can't you've got to burn him. You got to set fire to his body. And she's like,
Wow.
what? And he's like,
Yeah.
I'm serious. He's like, I'm not crazy. I'm a harmless drunk, but I act crazy so they won't get me. And you don't know who
Mm.
they is.
He
Yeah.
knows too much. He knows too
He
much.
doesn't know too much. Yes. And so he splits and she goes back to the studio. It's not long before Tom and she realizes the three people are in her studio and they're going to spend the night. They've invited themselves. And she's like, what the hell? And Tom is like, well, here's, after you left, the police came around. They're also asking about your father. And he's like, needless to say, they were not impressed by myself and my traveling companions, their lifestyle. So you're getting more and more the idea that the people in Point Dune are not only insular, but they're also highly
They're a
conservative.
triple. They're a triple, as I
Terrible.
know. A triple.
I mean, they're not the kind of people who would like hippies, like no, no hippies here, right? And so uh he said, we didn't know anyone else here. And she's like, all right, you can stay, there's a room there. And the other girls are kind of spying on them, and they all already see that Tom's kind of making the
Mhm.
moves on her subtly, or not so subtly, depending on how you look at it. And
Mhm.
but then you kind of do start to get the impression that she does kind of find him attractive, and they hug a little bit. But uh, and there's some really interesting piano music at this point. The music in this movie is mostly electronic, and a lot of it's these weird bloop and blip sounds and crazy shrieks. This movie is like really the sound design. It can be quiet for long periods and you'll hear like these electronic intervals coming in, and there's a lot of screaming. When people do scream, they scream really loud, very high pitched. And that's actually how
Uh,
the movie begins with Arletty. It's a wraparound story, so it's not the reason Arletty's narrating it to us is because she's in an insane asylum and she walks
mhm.
slowly toward us down this hallway, beautifully lit, and it's kind of like green and blue. And she's coming towards us, and her final thing is like, they'll come and get you, and no one will hear you scream. And she like screams at the top of her lungs. Uh,
Blood curdling.
but there's actually even a prologue to that, which has
Mhm.
a payoff later, which there's a guy who's running, and he falls down. I don't know, he's sick. He's running from people and he needs some water, and this pretty teenage girl sees him and he thinks she's going to give him some water, or she like holds his hand, but instead she slits his throat open, and then the title comes in.
Yeah.
Now
Nice.
that character is played by Walter Hill, the director. I mentioned we had talking about before we were recording, who produced Alien and of course directed Southern Comfort and 48 Hours and all these other films. But this was one of his first gigs, was just as a bit actor in this film. So, and the girl who slit his throat, I found out was just she happened to be the cousin of one of the crew, and they're like, "Can you come in and do this?" And so this guy ran into Walter Hill years later after Walter Hill was kind of a successful director, and he's like, "You remember my cousin slit your throat on this movie?" And they laughed about it. Uh, but
Wearing a nice dress. I mean, look, the thing is, I'm really into fashion, and the clothes are really beautiful in
oh
this
yeah,
70s film.
oh it's
I love 70s clothes. Yeah.
beautiful stuff. And yeah, so basically we just kind of follow these characters, and what is going on, what is up with this town, and they really have nothing to do, and the radio frequencies are out, and of course way before cell phone days, and so they're starting to feel kind of like abandoned, so you're starting to get that kind of spooky vibe. Um, and Arletty's pretty single-minded. She just wants to find out what happened to her father, and she keeps poring over his journals. Um, Tom has sneaked and read some of his journals as well. Uh, Tom knows a lot about this stuff even before coming in and interviewing people like Charlie. He's never been there before, but he's drawn to this, this legend. And the women are just kind of along for the ride. But what's interesting is, and that they're more of the comic relief and the more like they don't speak in this super dramatic way the way Tom and Arletty do. They speak in 70s
Yeah,
like slang.
they're down to earth kind of compared to the rest of the
They
people.
are, and they each have their own personalities. I just want to say about Anitra Ford real quick. Is Anitra Ford was a panel a the girl on The Price is Right who would turn the letters and stuff in the early
Oh,
70s when that kind of game show was starting. And so she was a
oh,
model. She did Price is Right, and she stumbled into film, and she ended up being in three well-known cult films. She was in The Big Birdcage, which we covered on this channel, and their Black Cinema. It had Pam Grier, and she was the white co-star. And then she also was later in a movie called Invasion of the Bee Girls, which is kind of a fun one. But in between, she did Messiah of Evil. Now she's on Facebook, and I have corresponded with her a couple of years ago, and I said, "Man, I loved you in Messiah of Evil and Big Birdcage." And she's
that's
just like,
cool.
"Oh, I'm so thrilled," you know.
Wow, I got really happy about it. Oh,
And
that's sweet.
like a lot of women, and I understand because our culture is based around vanity. So a lot of women, she won't be photographed anymore in her old age. She'd prefer you remember her as that.
Remember her. Yeah.
Yeah, Betty Page was like
Oh,
that too. Um, So yeah, nice, sweet woman, and very, 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 very proud of those works as she should be. Um, so she's very funny, and so she decides to go into town. And Tom, he has these, he has these funny little asides that he throws once in a while. Like he asks Arletty to unzip his vest, and she's like, "I'm sure you can do this yourself." And he doesn't have a vest; he has a vest. It's all buttoned here, but it's zipped on
hmm.
the sides. You know,
Interesting.
so very of its time
Fashion
period.
statement.
Yes. And so when she unzips it, then she has to go to sleep. And that's when he first really flirts with her. He's like, "You can't just unzip a man and then go to bed, leave him, you know." Uh, and so
And
when,
that's a very sly way of getting in there.
yeah. And so Laura gets sick of their flirting. She's going to go into
Mm.
town and see what's happening. And he's like, "You buy a woman a pair of shoes and she walks out on you." And so because she's got these really cool, funky shoes. And so she's thumbing a ride. And when Our Lady came into town, she went to a gas station, which that's a chilling scene too, because the gas station owner is shooting out into the woods. And this is the days when you film movies, and they look kind of like this. You had like a person framed and pure black behind them. Nobody does this anymore, and it's so incredible. And so there's just pure black behind this mobile station they filmed at, and the attendant is shooting, and Our Lady's like, "What are you shooting at?" And he's like, "They're dogs. There's wild dogs." And then of course he's the first guy who does the cautionary thing. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to Point Dune." He's like, "Why do you want to go to Point Dune?" It's that don't go to that creepy town. It's like in those Hammer movies where they're in the pub and he's like, "I want to go to the castle," and like, "Oh, don't go to the castle, mate. No good can come of that." And
Indeed. And there might be some lightning just as he says that.
right. And in what she said, at the gas station, she encounters this truck driver who's an albino. The actor was African American, but he was albino, very striking looking
Interesting.
guy.
Yeah.
And when the gas station attendant appears in the back of his truck, there's corpses, and one of them is the Walter Hill corpse from the beginning. Right, it's that throat slit. So uh, he's like, basically like, "Lady, leave. I don't care if you can pay, and we gotta get rid of this guy." And before long, the first sign that there's something crazy is they jump into his gas station and murder him and just like uh drag his body up on the little piston thing where he rejacks his cars up. And he's just
Mhm.
covered in blood. So, I neglected to mention that scene, sorry. But that's an early scene in the film, but you don't really see anything like that again until somewhat later. But so already that something's up. And so in
It's
her,
quite an interesting scene because I've never seen that before. Somebody being lifted up,
yeah,
dead, that
like I
with
think they
blood on.
really attached him to it. And then he
Yeah.
had to
Yeah. I
stay
was like,
limp.
wow. Yeah. Fair play. Great, great dead acting.
Yeah, with all that blood all over you. And
Mhm.
so when Laura goes into town, she's not really meaning to hitchhike, but she ends up hitchhiking with the albino truck driver. and the
Mm.
people are in the back of his truck. Now they're all sitting up like
I
this.
noticed he was very intense when
Oh
I
my gosh.
watched it. He's a bit intense, you know. But
He
yeah,
is.
that's
And
nice.
the thing is those dead people, well, those the people who were dead when the gas station guy peered in on them, they're all sitting there like this alive, including the Walter Hill guys had his throat. So they're all sitting there and she assumes they're alive. They're just like stiffs. Not that they're literally stiffs, but but they do move a little bit. So like this is the first undead thing we get. You know, they are dead, but they're still not quite, in the
Oh
ground.
wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, he picks her up and they have this delightful conversation. Of course, she's like a hipster and she's like, "Oh, what the heck? Oh, this is cool." And and he's like, "Do you like Wagner?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, Superman." And then he wants to feed, I heard of eat a beach rat that he's picked up because he likes to eat them. And
As you do.
yes, because he talks about a ritual called the waiting at the beach where all the people are there, and that's when he's like, and all the little creatures, and then he holds up the beach rat, and he's like, and he's so hurt when she doesn't want to eat it. She's like, "No,
Oh, is he
thanks." He's like,
alive? The beach rat, or is he dead?
"Huh?"
Is he a dead beach rat?
When he first picks it up, it's a live rat, but the one he hands to
Okay.
her and then chews on is not a real one. Because he
Okay.
just chomps on it, and you see a little blood, and he's like, "Are you sure you don't want it? It's really good." He's like so sad. And she's like, "No, no, that's cool, man. Just I'll walk the rest of the way," as one would probably do at that point. And so she goes into town and she goes to a grocery store, and so this is where you make like the commonplace frightening. There's people there, and some of them are seeing her between the aisles. Like she'll walk down the main aisle, and at the back of the main aisles where you can see them down the aisles, someone is watching her, uh, and she doesn't really know what the hell's going on. And finally, she sees like a whole bunch of these people, and they're all kind of older, square-looking people, and there's like, a good dozen or more, and they're congregating around the meat counter, and they've torn open the frozen meat, and they're eating the raw bloody meat. They're just consuming it voraciously.
Yes, indeed.
So that makes her feel a
With
little
passion.
like, yeah, like
Consuming
I
with
gotta get the hell out of here. And
passion.
she tries to get
Mm.
out, but the doors are locked, and they swarm on her, and
Oh, no.
you don't see it as in a Romero movie, but the strong implication is
But
yes.
how did they turn? Did we know how they turned? How they become the All
Yeah,
Hallows Eve?
it's a weird process because it's like they don't. I mean, I guess some of them like Walter Hill, but they don't necessarily die, but they do become undead because it's the blood moon curse.
Oh, because of the blood moon.
It's
Oh,
on
okay.
the whole town. Um, but what you're noticing is the people who turn first, which I don't think that's something that I thought about deeply until I'd seen the movie a few times, are the average bucolic, white cracker people in the town, the people, the church people and the police and the guys in the suits, and they're mostly all like well over 40 or 50, which back then looked like 60 or 70, and so
Yeah.
another proto Lynch touch is that bucolic town, and underneath it there's this evil, so it's kind of
Hmm.
festering, and that's from Lovecraft also. um so yeah.
Midsummer Murders. There's a
Yes.
there's a show in England called Midsummer Murders, kind of that vibe as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you mentioned Wicker Man earlier. Midsummer is, where another one like Wicker Man, where they go in and they see that cult, and the cult's like super violent, and the cult's like, "This is how we are," and
Oh yeah,
Florence
Midsummer.
Pugh,
Yeah.
Is thinking, "I'm never coming back to Sweden again."
Yeah.
But um, by the way, that final shot in Midsummer of her is my favorite final shot in that movie. One of my
Oh
favorite
wow, with
shots.
the flower wreath around her head.
Her
Yeah.
facial expression,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah. She's
she's
very,
like,
very.
we talked about this in the show recently. We haven't reviewed the movie. We talked about it, and because we're talking about folk horror, and yeah, because she's the queen now, and all the
Hmm.
patriarchal, all the four crude American dudes, including her boyfriend, all the bros got killed off by the cult. So now they made her the queen. So that may mean they're going to sacrifice her. That might mean she's going to become evil, but she doesn't really care in that moment after being
Yeah,
depressed the
she
whole movie.
belongs.
Yeah, it and she you can read all that on her face, I mean,
She's a great actress. She was in Dune, actually, even
yes, she's in
recently. Great. She was great in Dune. Yeah.
She's great. Yeah, and she's incredible in the Marvel stuff. And she's going to be in Thunderbolts and playing this same the newer Black Widow character, successor to the Scarlett Johansson character, but a different character, you know, same they were all trained in Russia to be assassins.
I admire her presence. I admire her presence. Absolutely. I think she's grown it into, even though Midsummer was great, I think she's even grown into herself even more.
But yeah, getting back to the this whole thing about the town and all these kind of tropes. Uh so Tony gets restless and decides she's going to go into town, Miss Joy Bang. And, she's just like, what's going on, man? She is getting scared. And Tom is trying to reassure her, and she goes into town foolishly to find Laura. So she does a similar thing. She stops at a movie theater, and she's alone in the movie theater at first. And they're playing this Western, forgot what it's called, with the West, which was a real Western. They got the footage for it. And Sammy Davis Jr. playing this sharpshooter against all these, white cowboys. And of course he kills all of them. And the scenes are funny that they show. And I read that wasn't the movie they were originally going to have them panning to, but the company owned the rights to it, distributed the movie. So like, we're just going to go ahead and toss this footage in here to save money. But it works because it's so jarring, because it doesn't show the scenes in linear order. It's like she's only sitting there for like maybe 20 minutes, but you see the beginning title, you see the shooting, you see the end title, and like, okay, what happened? Is it like the super abridged version? But it's not supposed to be, literal. So literal people in the audience, calm down. That's the kind of thing that fry people's fan bros brains, like wondering, well, that's not possible. It's like, it's art. I don't know what to tell
That's
you.
true. Yeah. It's not rational. Of course, it's not rational yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so eventually she notices the theater slowly filling up with these people. And sure enough, it's these same dreary people. And some of them are the same people that ate her friend. And the albino truck driver is among them too. And finally, they get
Well, he
really.
kind of looks like he'd eat someone only because of the energy that he's
Oh
giving
yeah,
off.
yeah, yeah. Oh, the energy. And he's Benny Robinson was his name. And he's like the mascot of the movie now. Like he's on the Blu-ray, his face. I mean, he's like the icon. Um,
Yeah, he's very cool looking,
but I'll
dude.
tell you a
Very,
real
very.
quick sad behind the scenes thing about it, unfortunately, is that when they had to square off the mobile gas station to shoot that scene in the beginning, the people who owned the gas station were extreme racists. And they
Oh
said,
no.
we are not letting this, what, get near our
Yeah.
stuff. And so they actually took the time, wasted the filmmaker's time, taking out all of the stuff in the store so that his kind wouldn't steal anything.
That is so disrespectful.
Even though he's
Wow.
walking in the store for 1 minute, you don't see the interior, and the and they're being filmed. Like, what's he gonna do? Like, whip out an Uzi and start going, "I'm gonna kill Whitey"? I mean, it's like, get it with it, man.
No, that's ridiculous.
It is. I didn't
Yeah.
know that until yesterday. Actually, I never knew that story, and it was like,
But
wow.
you know what? Like he's albino, so he is white anyway. But it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah. They didn't see it. They couldn't
So
see
yeah,
things rationally.
yeah, doesn't
So
matter.
yeah, they're
Doesn't
all
matter.
there,
They
and they
they were ignorant. Just to clarify, those people were being ignorant. Yeah.
and in a way that's kind of appropriate, because really the subtext or maybe text of the movie is that you don't come to Point Dune and you can't be different. Now they made an
Mhm.
exception with Benny, I guess, because he I guess he rounds up all the beach rats and shit, but he just has that kind of cult vibe. But everybody else is like, white and bucolic, and though that could also be an allegory too. Maybe Benny's their house Negro in their mind, but you just don't know. Maybe they tolerate Benny being there because he ferries the corpses back and forth in his truck, does the
It's
labor.
the 70s. You never know what people were thinking then.
Yeah, and you don't know what was deliberate and what was later that we see, the layers
Yeah.
that we peel back. And according to Gloria and Willard, a lot of this stuff that people quote unquote read into Messiah of Evil, they didn't intend. It was almost disappointing hearing the interviews because they're smart people, they're nice people, but they don't come across as intellectually as they do in their writing at all. And a lot of people don't. What I mean? They seem like they don't understand anything about the occult or have any real interest in it. Like this, they're almost like this accidentally happened, and that's channeling. I mean, that's magic. It was meant to come through them. In the way it did with all the circumstances of the movie, the budget, the setting, and they do say, it kind of made something happen because they didn't think anything of this movie after it came and went, you know, and they sold out completely, like almost immediately,
I deliberately didn't watch the whole of this movie because I want to watch it, keep it for me and my boyfriend to watch.
Oh, cool, okay,
Because it's great. So I was like, no, I'm gonna actually keep it to
okay.
watch with my boyfriend.
Well,
It
trying not to
looks
get
great.
deep spoilers, but suffice to say, after our two kind of Tom's, you know, lovers are dispatched, and we realize these people are kind of like zombies, and that they are cannibalistic. Um, by this time, you finally see some authority in Point Dune, and the cops summon Our Lady to the shore, and apparently her father died. He was building some wild structure, like a sculpture of metal, and on the shore, and it collapsed on him and killed him.
Oh
So
no.
it's really weird. But she sees his hand, and she holds his hand, and she knows it's not him. She recognizes it's not him, and so but she goes along with it. She tells Tom, that's not my father. And this is getting crazier, and they tell Tom pretty no uncertain terms. He's like, "Yeah, after this, you and the little lady need to leave here. This ain't a tourist town, man. We don't really want you here. And as if they didn't already get that vibe, and so her and Tom go two separate directions. Tom goes into town to find the girls, and the scourge is starting. The people are in the streets, and one thing that tells you that they're starting to turn is their eyes start to bleed. And
Okay.
so one human woman approaches them, and she's like, "My whole family, some of them turned and ate the rest." And she's like, "I don't know what to do." And he's wondering, what should I do? He's not like the most selfless guy in the world, but he is in a crisis, so he's kind of it's in a real subtle acting, and he's kind of like, should I help her? Should I talk to her? And he's like, okay, okay, but then he's like, oh, your eye. And then she's like, "Oh no, I'm becoming one of them," and she like
You
knows.
have a little, you have a little.
Yeah, and so she well, they kind of run from each other, not run, but they back away from each other because she's resigned to her fate and he doesn't want any part of it. And they attack him, these zombie weird people, and they do try to bite him. They slash at him, so he gets through town. He's bloody, and then the cops, the human cops, come to dispatch these people. So they start shooting them, and well, bullets don't affect them. So uh,
Okay.
but in the midst of this, one of the cops turns to another cop, and the cop, you see his eyes start to bleed, and he turns on his fellow cop, and the fellow cop shoots him like he's one of them, and it doesn't affect him. So he starts to run, and then the infected cop just blows him away. And they're all cold and merciless. I mean, they don't act mindless like zombies in Romero's movies, but they are single-minded. I mean, they definitely emanate evil, but it is
Mm.
something that's more like a curse or a contagion. But they are zombies in the sense that they stop living as we know it and are reborn as these carnivorous beings, these cannibalistic beings.
They're undead
They're
cannibals.
undead, yeah. So this movie is pushing the envelope a little of our stated theme, but and I was not sure I was even going to do it because of that, but Chuck was like, you got to do Messiah of Evil, man. I was like, all right, all right. So I went ahead and did it, and here it is. So yeah, and Marletti finds her father. He's alive, and there's like this very dramatic thing where he's going into All How he's turning. She's starting to turn also, and she feels that because she can feel like her she's starting to feel less sensation in her limbs, like she almost burns her hand on an eye, a stove eye, and she doesn't feel it. And so she has to do what the Drowned Drunk told her to do to her father. And after that, Tom finds her and he's like, I came back to get you. And, she attacks him with scissors because she's freaking out because she had kind of attacked her father too, because he was about to attack her. So the father's dispatched and he wanted to be dispatched. So he was aware all through this. It's like knowing you're having Alzheimer's kind of, or
Okay.
like,
He was like, kill me.
yeah, it's like flowers for Algernon, where you're intelligent and then you're slowly, your brain is degenerating. And so she stabs Tom and guys, now he's really wounded. But they get out of there, they go to the shore and the people are following them. And yeah, that's kind of, then a lot of it is kind of left up to, I mean, what you do find out when she meets her father is the backstory. He tells her, and there's a flashback. And what they were talking about earlier is the blood moon comes once a century. So a century, and they show a flashback to like the Old West or whatever. And so I guess 1870s. So there was a guy who was a hunter and he was just prospecting out in the hills of Point Dune. It was called New Bethlehem back then. And the stark stranger comes. You never see the guy's face really. He's wearing a big hat and a long coat. Um, some people who are kind of scholars of this kind of metafiction we were talking about have speculated that he's kind of a representative of Nyarlathotep character in H.P. Lovecraft, who was an inhuman being, but also appeared this way to a lot of humans in the stories. Um, and so he's probably an homage to Nyarlathotep. And I actually wrote a story where I conflated them, but I've written a lot of weird fan fiction over the years. But um, so the Dark Stranger, we don't see his face. It was actually played also by Michael Greer, just probably for to save money. But then there's some fans who are like, maybe Tom's the Dark Stranger. But there's no way Tom's the Dark Stranger because why would the Dark Stranger be sending people to kill himself? That doesn't make any sense. Because what he did a century ago is he spread the madness. The people started eating each other, and then he walked into the ocean and vowed to return. And
Wow.
so now it's time. The time is here, and he's here, and that's kind of the warning. So the stuff that the father's telling her, the way he's telling the story is very gothic and very much H.P. Lovecraft, like evocative of this, whole kind of mythos they've got, the lore they have behind it. And so yeah, it's an incredible movie. It kind of didn't do great, and then it got re-released under the title Dead People, which it didn't do too great under that title. Go figure.
Messiah of Evil is a great name.
It's a brilliant name. Yeah. They didn't reclaim it for a while because they were desperate to try to make money. And so they tried to pass it off as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and they retitled it Return of the Living Dead, even
Mm.
though the Return of the Living Dead novel was already out by then. And so Romero and Russo tried to sue them, but this was actually a key point because this is when Romero realized he didn't have any rights anymore to Night of the Living Dead at all. He'd been ripped off and he'd not filed the right copyright paperwork. But Rousseau claimed the rights to the term Living Dead. He didn't. You can't copyright a term like that, but he claimed them, and that's why Rousseau's stuff ends of the Living Dead and Romero's stuff ends of the dead going forward. They had a little agreement, a little schism, and we're going to get into that schism with the next movie that we cover because that's important to its genesis. Um, but yeah, so they lost the lawsuit, but well, actually, they did win the cease and desist, so they stopped calling it Return of the Living Dead. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's become a cult movie over the years.
They stopped calling it Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, they only were calling it this for this one little run where they were trying to pair it on a double bill with Night of the Living Dead and pass it off as a sequel. And that's when Romero and them tried to sue them. And so even though they succeeded in getting them to stop, Romero unfortunately found out at that point that he didn't have any rights to the phrase living dead, that Rousseau kind of had I mean, neither of them really had the exact rights, but Rousseau, they kind of divvied it up, because
Hmm.
they were no longer partners, which that's integral to what we'll talk about later. But so as far as Messiah of Evil, that's a wrap on Messiah of Evil.
Okay.
Hi, you've been watching Deep Images, our series on zombies. Please remember to well, I'll let my co-host tell you what you.
Well, like, subscribe, and share, please. I have no shame about asking people to like, subscribe, and share because, we are an independent community here. We're doing everything ourselves, and let's just do our bit to spread the love and the beautiful time that everybody has taken to research these movies and bring them to you. So yeah, we do everything with love, but so that's what we'd like. We'd like you to share with love as well. So thank you.
We appreciate you watching. Take care. Thank you.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.